The Renaissance was over. It had been for years. Disney's heyday had stopped right before the new millennium. Since then, the animation department was trying to figure out a new direction and its footing simultaneously. So the studio turned to two of their Renaissance men, Kirk Wise and Gary Trousdale, directors of Beauty and the Beast and Hunchback of Notre Dame, to recapture the magic formula from days of old. And Trousdale and Wise decided the best way to tap into that magic was to blow it up. Director Gary Trousdale.
We were coasting a little bit, and after a while the coasting kind of loses momentum. We're starting to like wonder, okay, so what are we going to do? And Don Hahn is the one that came up and said, okay, if we want to make a movie, if we want to stick together and make a movie that we want to make, we have to sit down and figure out what it is, or they're going to tell us what to make. So the stories that Don tells about Atlantis being born over a 4-hour lunch at a Mexican restaurant are absolutely true. He's not making that up. We got together with Kirk and Don and the writer Tab Murphy and myself. We went to a Mexican restaurant in Burbank, and we just started talking about like, what do we like? And it's like multiple plates of nachos and pitchers of margaritas, but we just started talking about, well, what kind of film do we want to do? We've just done two like reasonably successful ones, and they were both musicals. Do you want to do a musical again? Not really. What, do you want to do another fairy tale? Well, we're kind of running a little low on fairy tales. What do we want to do? And so we thought we started to think about like the Disney live action stuff of like the 50s and 60s that we grew up with as kids that we liked. And ones like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea came up. It's like, yeah, this old Jules Verne stuff. That was like great action stuff. By the way, could not get a G rating today. But it was at the time. So that's kind of where that came from when we started to talk about Journey to the Center of the Earth, and the other Jules Verne stuff. So we went and we read that, which is, by the way, a not very interesting book. It's a great idea, but the book itself is like, they never get there. They don't get any more than like about a third of the way, and it just all falls apart. And a lot of the time, it's just blundering around in pitch dark. But the idea was great, and then we said, well, we got to get to the center of the earth. I mean, or we got to find something. What can we do? And that's when the idea of Atlantis came up. It's like, well, maybe they could find that, and that's how that came about. The two films that we had done before had bought us a lot of goodwill. I mean, I'm not gonna, I recognize that that's probably the only reason we got it done is because we did the other ones, and they said, all right, they did okay before, we should probably trust them. And we also did kind of lean heavily on the reasoning that, look, this was Walt Disney's bread and butter for years. This is kind of what made Disney Studios for several decades, was this kind of story, this kind of action adventure, stuff. It was live action, but there's a I don't know if it was Kirk or Don that came up with it. I think it was Don that said, so we're still in Disneyland, we're just not in Fantasyland anymore. Now we're in Adventureland. So that's kind of what sold them. It's like, we're not really straying from Disney, we're just straying from the fairy tales. I mean, I think it was mostly the same, because I think the new bosses who were all part of the old structure anyway, I think they recognized that by and large the whole machine worked, and they didn't want to try and reinvent it. They did keep an eye on us, and they did ride herd on us. So we did have meetings where, we were steered in different ways. I think our first big screening we had gone in with, it was a lot more action adventure and a lot less, just like what it turned out to, like the relationship stuff between people in Atlantis and the explorers. And we had, like a lot more like fantastic creatures, subterranean creatures, and adventures and things like that. And our first screening, we had the screening, and we were all going to gather around in a conference room, and they had lunch laid out for us and everything, and there was like all the lead animators and the art department and the editors, and everybody was there. It was like 30 people, and we filed into the room, and Tom and Peter were sitting at the head of the table, and Peter had this very kind of not happy look on his face. And when everybody's in the room, because people were filing in, like, oh yeah, that was a fun screening. Yeah, what'd you think? And the normal chit chat. And Peter said, all right, everybody, Don, Kirk, and Gary, stay in the room. Everybody else, please leave. And he just cleared the room, and we were told, you can't make this movie. It's too expensive. It's too big. It's not emotional enough. It doesn't have, it's all about the crazy, the crazy monsters and the adventure, and it's not enough about Atlantis. Okay, that's fair. Granted, it was our first screening, and the first screenings never go, they're never what is going to end up on the screen at the end. You're always going to figure out what's wrong and what's right and how to fix it. But it was kind of a big sweeping thing. It's like he wanted us to take it all out. We took probably about 80% of it out. But yeah, it was pretty clear. It was pretty clear. It wasn't like this is a negotiation. This is like we were telling you this. We were telling you in no uncertain terms that this movie will not be made. It's not. The story. We're not happy with the story. B, it's way too expensive. The kind of effects and creatures and all this other stuff was just like you just blown the budget with this. You can't do this. So it wasn't just like, oh, you guys totally screwed up the story, which they may have put it in those terms. They may have said you're leaning too far this way and not enough the other. But it was also very much like there's a financial aspect to this that is, you can't support it. Whatever our budget was going to be, we would probably, added another 50% to it, and it was just, I think we had a pretty good budget on it, but they just didn't want it to be a ridiculous budget. Yeah. So they had their say. It wasn't like we're going to give Kirk and Gary and Don a free hand in this, but they did trust us. So that's probably why we didn't get fired. There are elements of the first version that I would have liked to have got in, but I'm really happy with how it came out. So yeah, I can't say that they were wrong.
Before the Atlantis release, the New York Times ran a feature on the State of the Union at Disney. In the nearly year and a half since Joe Roth stepped down as head of Walt Disney Studios and was replaced by Peter Schneider, former president of the animation division, the studio has seemed to many to be in a receding mood, producing fewer movies, generating less impact, and battling internal problems caused by corporate downsizing and the widespread impression that its core animation division has lost some of its creative fire. When Atlantis was previewed for theater owners at their annual convention in Las Vegas in January, the reaction was decidedly mixed. Many felt the film compared unfavorably to Shrek, a computer-animated family film that was released last week by rival DreamWorks. And Atlantis is unlike all other recent Disney animated efforts. It's a pure action adventure, for instance, and contains no songs or cute animal sidekicks. Mr. Schneider rejected recent criticisms that the company's animation division had lost its creative spark. He also predicted that despite the naysayers, Atlantis would do quite well with audiences. We've already said yes to an animated television series based on it, he said. Besides, Disney executives maintain that they made it easier for their animated features to break even by a cost-cutting campaign that made Atlantis, which cost $100 million, about 35% cheaper to produce than the studio's other recent animated efforts. The LA Times also published a piece that pondered Disney's fate. One would think that the strong opening of DreamWorks' computer-animated fable Shrek, which has already become a surprise hit of the summer, would be sending tremors through the executive suites at Walt Disney Studios in Burbank. After all, Disney is the king of animation, and it would be embarrassing if DreamWorks were ultimately to claim the prize for top animated movie of the summer especially given the fierce rivalry that now exists between Disney chairman Michael Eisner and DreamWorks partner Jeffrey Katzenberg, who used to head the Disney studio until a bitter falling out with Eisner. Dick Cook, chairman of Walt Disney Motion Pictures Group, disputes the notion that the success of Shrek might dim the chances for Atlantis. What traditionally happens is, when the marketplace has been heated up, good things happen, Cook said. I remember when The Sixth Sense came out. Everybody was worried because a couple weeks before, The Blair Witch opened to big numbers. People said it would take the steam out of The Sixth Sense. All it did was fuel the fire. The film made $350 million worldwide. In general, however, non-musical action-adventure animation has been on tough sledding lately. Last year, 20th Century Fox saw its studio chief depart, and it abandoned big plans for animation after its $90 million space adventure, Titan AE, went down in flames at the box office, and Warner Brothers sputtered when it was unable to capitalize on critics' high praise for The Iron Giant.
At the time, we were not that impressed with Shrek just as a movie, because I remember, going, talking to people not in the industry and other people in the industry, and a lot of people just go, "Oh my God, it's the funniest thing! It's so funny!" And I think it was Don and I went and saw it. It's like, we got to see this thing finally, and we went and saw it, and it was okay. I mean, I didn't think it was particularly funny. There was like a couple of things I did laugh out loud at, but mostly it's like, I'm not seeing what people are just loving, and the shots that they're taking, because people go, "Oh, they're taking such great shots at Disney. Oh, they're making such fun at Disney." And Dawn and I kind of looked at each other and said, "We make better fun of ourselves than this. I mean, this is, yeah, okay, it's something, but we weren't that worried or excited about it. But the fact that it was digital, a full digital movie that was, it was pretty funny and the characters were pretty good, that really turned on people and really scared the hell out of executives. And that's when people said, "Oh, this is the way animation is going to go," and they were right. I know after the film was released, and we did press tours, and the post-film press tours on this were not like the ones in previous films that we had done, because they had the idea that we're going to do like little tours all around, all over the country. You're just going to go to like city to city to city, like one day here, one day here, one day here, and it was literally all over the country. And so we split up a little bit. We did some overlapping, but we'd fly to Phoenix, and then we went to Salt Lake City, and then we went to Minneapolis, and then, just like boom, 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 and just like a day at a time. You fly in the morning, you're doing phone interviews in the car, you go out to dinner with the handlers and a couple key people, and the next day you do interviews, and then you're on a plane that afternoon, and then you repeat the next, after an hour and a half flight, you land in the next city. So it was kind of exhausting and kind of exhilarating at the same time. And we were so busy doing that, it was hard to see what else was going on, because we literally covered the whole country.
Atlantis was released and grossed $186 million worldwide, but was not profitable according to Disney War, based on its $100 million budget.
Because it was a little different, because it wasn't, funny talking animals and singing princesses. There was a little bit of a like, what's this? There's people shooting and people punching each other, and I don't know if I want my 4-year-old to see this. So there was a little bit of that, what we called the soccer moms. Yeah, I mean, parents with little kids were a little bit, some of the kids were like, "This is cool." Other kids, yeah, they wanted to see, talking bugs and fun songs. So, victim of our own success, I suppose.
Disney would continue with its cost-cutting measures less than a year after Atlantis' release. That year, they fired 250 animation employees. As early as 1999, they had 2,200 employees. As of 2002, there were now 1,500. While the studio was in flux, Trousdale, Wise, and Hahn were placed back in development.
I think it was kind of back in development, but not really like hard development. It was like, you guys yeah, just hang out, and if anything comes, anything comes to you, and if we have any need for some jokes or anything like that. So it was kind of low key for a little bit. I'm trying to remember how it went after that, because it wasn't terribly long after that I think Kirk was kind of had his eye on some live action stuff, and that was kind of when we split up. And Don was doing other stuff, and so Atlantis was kind of the last thing that we did together. I mean, I was starting to look at other projects at that time. Kirk was kind of in effect out of animation. I mean, he was still in, and still involved, but not really in the kind of animation, because he went and he was like doing he was directing like the vocal performances for the Miyazaki films that we had acquired, or had partnered with. So the English versions of like Princess Mononoke and Totoro and things like that. And Don, I can't remember what Don was doing at the time, but he was also doing like other stuff. So yeah, we kind of split up.
The team was splitting up, but the three would always have their memories together.
There's so many different things, and I'm trying to remember what I would remember the most, because the day that we were nominated for Best Picture, and going in, getting up at 5 a.m. to watch Walter Matthau, I think, announce who in New York at like 8 a.m. New York time, who the Best Picture contenders were, and then not being able to go to sleep, and going to a liquor store and getting some bottles of champagne and getting to work, and the people there are already half in the bag, because they all had the same idea, and that was just a crazy day. Or the day that we broke 100 million, and Kirk and Don and I stormed Michael Eisner's office with a bottle of champagne. It's like, hooray, we're the first cartoon to do it. And we were stopped cold at his door by his secretary. It's like, you can't go in there. It's like, yeah, but cartoons and 100 million. It's like, no, you have to wait here. And we were like, God damn, what, doesn't she realize? Doesn't she know? And, like 20 minutes later, these three giant guys in really expensive suits came out, and Michael Eisner shaking their hand and where they went. There was a delegation from the Vatican that we were like, oh, okay, we'll be quiet now. We'll just slink back to our little cartoon house across the street. Well, they let us in after that, and it was really nice. But yeah, that was kind of humbling.
And now Gary Trousdale was on his own for the first time in years.
I started to work on the early version of Romeo and Juliet, which I guess came out a few years ago. I believe Kelly Asbury ended up being the director on that. It was brought to Disney. It was being championed by Elton John and his partner, David Furnish, and their production company, Rocket Pictures in London. And so we were kind of put on that, not really put on it, but they asked, do you want to do it? And to me, it sounded kind of cool. And the idea at the time was it was going to be a live action digital hybrid with, live action backgrounds and plates, live action actors, like human actors, and digital gnomes that would, they're out in the garden, and when the people aren't around, then they have their own little Romeo and Juliet story, their own little drama and romance and everything, which kind of appealed to me. I thought that was like kind of a neat idea. And we met with the London team, the writers over there, and but this was coming at a time when this is like when like the full force of the Shrek effect, the digital revolution was hitting, and there were like huge layoffs, like whole departments were being laid waste. Even the big departments like animation and cleanup and effects and layout, and those were being scaled drastically back. Departments like scene planning and scene checking were completely eliminated. And there were a lot of like massive pay cuts, to the people that were left. Coupled with the fact that Michael Eisner didn't really like gnomes anyway. Made it kind of difficult. I mean, we'd gotten like a fair amount of this boarded, and we were doing test footage and all this. And first, I came back and said, we're not going to do the live action digital hybrid. It's too expensive and too difficult. We don't want to do that. I said, but no, it's not that difficult. We can do it. It's like, no, we don't want to do it. We're just going to do it all digital. Digital will look like it's live action anyway. We said, no, it's not. They weren't having any of that. And then, then Michael said, I don't really like gnomes anyway. I don't get what's so funny about gnomes. My wife likes flamingos. Maybe you should do something about flamingos. So it was kind of trouble. I don't remember if anybody asked why he didn't. He just said he didn't like them. He didn't think they were funny. He just thought they were dumb. We actually had a flamingo in the movie, in the Romeo and Juliet. He was like a lawn flamingo, and he was one of their friends. So we thought, what? We're going to do more of this. So so that kind of that didn't speak well for our future as a production. I mean, it was kind of three strikes. It was like, okay, that the crew is and the studio is like being decimated and like not being paid, and Michael doesn't like the movie. So, and the original concept, the kind of cool concept for the movie is out the window. Like right then, that was it.
But it must have been hard to leave a studio where Gary had spent most of his adult life.
Not hard. I mean, ultimately, it wasn't hard. For all the reasons I had said before. And I remember at the time when I went to DreamWorks, and I told my mom, and she said, "Well, what about all your friends? What about all your friends at Disney?" I said, "Mom, they're all here at DreamWorks." They had all, that pretty much everybody had already left. Somebody had told me they had come back and in the last days at Disney, they'd come over for lunch, just like to visit, and they said, "Man, this place is a tomb." And it's something I hadn't really noticed, because it was, while it happened fairly quickly, it happened in stages. It wasn't like, okay, one day everybody's gone. It was like, one week these guys are gone, next week these guys are gone. So it was a little bit gradual, and a little bit of the frog in the frying pan. You just don't notice how bad it's getting until it's really bad. And this person coming back and pointing out, like, there's nobody here. There's whole sections that are just like completely mothballed, that I realized, like, oh yeah, it really is. It really is a ghost town. And that was, when, like I said, as soon as I left, like within 24 hours, I was getting calls from Jeffrey. And at, full disclosure, I didn't really want to work with Jeffrey again, because he can be very trying and a handful. As much as I admire and respect him, he's not the easiest guy to work for. And I thought, well, I don't really want to work for Jeffrey again. So I was starting to look around, and I was talking to Lucasfilm at the time, because they were about to start up an animation studio. So I flew up and talked to them. They were very like encouraging and positive, and said, "We would hire you today, but George has to meet you, and he's in Morocco right now. They were shooting one of the Star Wars films, and he said, he's not going to be back for like 3 months." But we can't hire you without you meeting him. And Jeffrey was calling literally every day. So I just caved in and said, all right, I'll do it.
Disney was now a tomb for Trousdale. Not so long ago, it had been teeming with life, enthusiasm, and just the right amount of weirdness that produced animated classics for years to come.
Early on in my days there, when I was doing I was an assistant for special effects on the Black Cauldron, and it was so behind, they had us working on Christmas Eve, and we're all grumbling and sitting there and working on Christmas Eve, and son of a bitch, I don't like this. And a knock came at my door, and this was back when we were on the main lot still, and I'm in I think B wing, and a knock comes on the door, and I said, "Come in," and I hear this I hear this, ooh, and I look, and there's a guy in a gorilla suit with a Santa coat and Santa hat comes shuffling in, like knuckle walking in, dragging a sack, and he pulls out of the sack a 16-ounce can of Budweiser and sets it on my desk and goes, ooh, and he leaves. And I'm thinking, what the hell was that? And I hear, knock, 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 come in, ooh, and he's like doing this all down the hallways. That's something I have not forgotten.